God bless everybody. Today it is January 11th of 2025. I want to do a Middle East update real quick. There's two fronts forming. One on the Egyptian side. They're doing a massive buildup on the Egyptian border. And then we're also seeing, as we've seen for the last month, a buildup on the Turkish border for an invasion into Syria. Now that we've seen the Free Syrian Army and the HTS backed groups, which are Turkish backed groups, overtake Assad in 12 days, that country has now fallen with Assad's regime, and so now that vacuum has been absorbed and taken over by the HTS and these Turkish-backed Syrian groups. So we've seen in the last month a Turkish buildup for an imminent invasion into Syria, and I was warning that this would happen around January of 25. Now, I talked about in my last video, I mentioned that I thought there was a date in history in the Jewish calendar that might be an invasionary date, which would be 25 Tevet, and it would also be the same time in the same month that Alexander the Great invaded Syria in January. So this all lines up, and so I think this is possibly the date of the invasion, which would be 25 Tevet, which would be January 25th of 2025. And that if you go back into history on this very date of the 25th of Tevet, so I'm a little concerned that on January 25th of 2025, which is 25 Tevet of this year, we would start to see a chain of events start to occur in the Middle East. This was the actual catalyst that brought Alexander down into Syria against not only Israel, but a major campaign against Egypt. And we're starting to see a buildup of Egypt on their border also. So what occurred was Alexander the Great met with this high priest from the Jews because they had claimed that the Jews were planning to betray him. And so what this did was it set off it made him mad. It made Alexander so mad that he invaded Syria almost immediately against not only the Jews, but a major invasion into also Lebanon, Palestine, and into Egypt. So this was the catalyst that brought him down into Syria originally. And then within about a year and a half, he had basically taken over the whole Middle East. Now he went further than that. I mean, he went up to almost China, India, and different things like that. But in general, he absorbed the whole Middle East in a year and a half. And if you follow his movements, I believe that they're going to mirror or mimic exactly what Erdogan's getting ready to do. And he's getting ready to invade. And with these Syrian-backed armies, along with the HTS, which he already has control, with also pushing the Russians out of their airport and their naval port, he won't have any stops to get into Lebanon. So I've been talking about this for a while now. I don't know exactly how long. We go back a couple of years on this topic. Alexander the Great and Erdogan are going to mimic each other in their movements. I've been talking about this for some time. If you go down and you actually look at the maps that they give you here in Alexander's movements into Syria through the Middle East, you'll realize that you're going to see a similar event occur as we move into the end of this month. He's going to start breaking out, I believe. So I've been stressing on this map for some time, the movements and how this will play out similarly in the future here as we move into the next 3-4 years. This is really going to affect us as we get to the end of January here, I believe, because Turkey's getting ready to break out. If 25 Tevet is what I think it is, that is going to be the catalyst that sends him into a rampage against Israel and the Egyptians. I don't know exactly what's going to happen to offset him, but for some reason he's going to feel betrayed, and then he's going to start an invasion down into Syria, which is going to start a chain of events. If you look at Alexander the Great's movements when he came down from the Battle of Issus, which was where he basically routed the Persians, we just saw that Iran was pushed out of Syria, okay, because they had bases and different things over there, and now Iran is not really a factor. These are all Turkish-backed groups, so that's extremely important. Also, if you go back in Alexander the Great, he forced Darius the Mede to then force them east towards Erbil, Iraq for the Battle of Gaugamela, so that's extremely important. And we have these Syrian forces pushing up against the Kurds, driving them east as Turkey's pummeling them from the north. Okay, so that's extremely important. So in history, though, that the Kurds are not his main problem yet. He will deal with them in time. And so he's going to come back to the Kurds. He's going to force them all towards the Battle of Gaugamela, which you can see is going to happen around October of this year. But he's going to go down into Lebanon, and he's going to start this Battle of Tyre. Now, you can see those dates there, and this is why I indicated that he's going to enter around January of this year. Now we're at 25 Tevet on the 25th of January, which is when we see this potential event starting to break out. So I'm just saying there's some massive correlations going on here. He would do a siege on Tyre, Lebanon, so he would enter Lebanon around March, which is about when Alexander got down there, and he did a massive siege on Tyre, which ended in July. Okay. Then he drove down through Israel and then had a battle of Gaza in October. Okay. This is extremely important because we have now a buildup on the Egyptian border for a buildup on the Turkish border, and you're going to see a clash in Gaza between, this sounds crazy, Turkey and Egypt. This was a decisive battle against Egypt, which it just disintegrated their whole army. And so when they failed and Egypt basically lost that campaign, they fell back. And then when Turkey entered into Egypt, he was greeted as a liberator by the population. So I don't know if Al-Sisi is going to be in a very good condition as we move forward here. So I went back into the history books and I wanted to see exactly how that happened. So just be aware that the major clash between Turkey and Egypt, which I see coming up around October of 2025, will happen in Gaza. That will basically vanquish the Egyptian armies to the point where they're not a threat anymore at the moment in time. They will rebuild over time because they do go against Antichrist in the future. But Turkey will just drive into Egypt and he will be considered a liberator, and he'll just not have a threat down there. There won't be any real threat against him. What happens next is Erdogan or Turkey would then drive back up to Tyre and then go back against the Kurds for the Battle of Gaugamela around October. Now that's interesting that we have two Octobers here. Now the years are different, but because we're talking modern warfare, it would not take anything for Erdogan to just drive back to Tyre and then head over to Erbil, Iraq, and then start beating up the Kurds because he owns all of this. You know, these are very short areas to cross in a very short period of time, even with armor. I mean, we took the Middle East over in basically a week in Desert Storm. That's what I mean. We're not talking about conventional warfare back in the time of the Romans and Alexander the Great's time. This is modern warfare. It's going to move much quicker. So in October, you have this destruction of Gaza, and that is the war against Egypt. You're going to see him drive back around October of this year, I believe, same year. You're going to see the Battle of Gaugamela, which is him going against the Kurds. And when the Kurds collapse, they collapse down towards Baghdad, okay, to this battle here around December, and then they collapse into Shush, Iran in January for the Battle of the Persian Gate. So once the Kurds or the Medes align with the Persians or Iran, we would see Turkey come from Gaugamela down to here and then push them into Iran and then smash both these nations, and then that completes Daniel 8. At that moment in time, Iran is under the umbrella of Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is getting ready to happen next. Turkey will drive, now that he owns basically the whole Middle East and all the 10 nations that are basically confronting Israel. He owns Egypt. Put and Cush are going to be joining with them. So all the nations are included. Even Yemen's in this. Iran's in this. So all nations are under Turkey's control at this point. So they're going to go from the Battle of Shush directly back to Israel, and you're going to see 10 nations literally form around Israel around February of 2026. And I have on my paradigm a massive event between February 17th of 2026 and March 4th of 2026 with these serious astrological events that are solar and blood moon events that are getting ready to happen. So it's extremely important that we watch this pretty closely, but I wanted to bring this 25 Tevet information up to your attention. I want you to realize that Turkey is talking about actually working with the HTS and the Free Syrian-backed nation, or groups that are Turkish-backed. So basically Turkey owns Syria right now in general, and how he's getting ready to set up new bases. How our government's literally been going up into Turkey asking why they're getting ready to do an invasion into Syria. Now that this vacuum has filled up with their Turkish-backed groups, they're now talking about setting up these bases, and so they know this, and so Trump's going to pull our troops out. I've been talking about this. Trump's going to pull our troops out on January 20th. It's going to immediately be filled by Erdogan. But then are we going to see another pandemic hit like we did see this similar mimicking event in 2019, which we could possibly see happen? And we have like 6 or 8 viruses out here that could easily break out on a global level at this moment in time. So this is extremely important. Israel is requesting why Egypt is starting to increase military presence on the Sinai Peninsula. Now this is extremely important here, and can even be reflective of Nebuchadnezzar. So Alexander was going down to take on Egypt because he thought not only Israel was being not honest with him, but he thought that Egypt had set up an alliance with Israel, and so that he would have to go down and deal with Egypt, which was where they clashed at the Battle of Gaza. When you get into Nebuchadnezzar, they stopped paying tribute to Nebuchadnezzar and started giving some tribute to Egypt. When Nebuchadnezzar came down to deal with Israel, the Egyptians fled to Egypt and didn't help Israel. So Nebuchadnezzar came down, dealt with Israel, and then ended up going into Egypt. So that's what I mean. History is going to repeat or mimic itself as we move forward. But also, as we see, these groups are starting to form on top of each other. And you also have another problem here, because as Egypt's starting to advance north, as they're getting ready to do a potential invasion as Turkey gets ready to come down, Israel's squeezed in the middle here. This is also going to affect Jordan quite tremendously as we move forward, and we'll see how that government deals with this as we move forward in the next year or two. The last thing I'd like to sort of bring to your attention, I think this is sort of cool. I get into all these connections. You guys may not find them cool, but I do, and so I'd like to bring them to your attention. When you get into Tevet in the Jewish calendar, which we're in right now, I talk about the 25th of Tevet as we go down into this article. This is usually can be a month of judgment. We have a number of events here in Tevet that can lead to past judgments in history that could reflect judgments in the future. The other thing that I think is extremely interesting is if you go into what they're talking about here, this is unique because this is occurring this time. The first of Tevet occurred on January 1st, which was actually the last day of Hanukkah, if I'm not mistaken. And so this is a pretty unique event that Hanukkah would end on the very first day of Tevet, and Tevet 1 would line up on the very first day of the January calendar on the Gregorian side. So I think it's a unique thing that Hanukkah would end on the very first day of Tevet, which is January 1st. Now when you get down in Tevet, there is some ramification for being a month of judgment. You see that on Tevet 10, Nebuchadnezzar and his army besieged Jerusalem, and it's now commemorated with a fast day. So that was extremely important. As you go down into these different judgments and events that have happened to the Jews on these very specific days in Tevet, we see also on 25 Tevet that Alexander the Great met with this high priest and said that the Jews were intending to betray him, which then sent him into a rage against not only the Jews in Israel, but also Egypt, and actually dealt with the Persians and the Kurds or the Medes all at the same time. I mean, this is going to be a massively encompassing invasion once Erdogan completes his roundabout through the Middle East. So just get ready, because this is getting ready to affect us all. So I wanted to bring this all to your attention. Find the open door, find the Lord Jesus. He's the most important thing out here that we should be looking for. Get right with God, get the oil in your lamp, and get ready, because 2025 is going to rock and roll everybody, and it's going to be an ugly event, I believe.